A Nigerian fintech giant, Flutterwave, has just secured a banking license after processing over $40 billion in lifetime payments. This marks a major shift from payments processor to full financial institution. Meanwhile, Ghana is reimagining finance by turning its national ID into a payment card, allowing citizens to send and receive money without relying on traditional bank cards or mobile apps. And in Nigeria, regulators are tightening their grip as the Central Bank of Nigeria brings together players like Flutterwave and Paystack under a new AML initiative, highlighting a shift where compliance is becoming just as important as innovation. These and more stories on Tech Tides Africa. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. My name is Karen. Joining me is Kelvin from Nigeria. How are you doing, Kelvin?
I'm doing well. I'm doing great. I spent some time with the family over the weekend, so yeah, I'm ready to go for the week. How are you doing?
As you know, I am recovering from a bit of an asthma episode, so you guys will forgive me if my voice does weird things today. I know it's deep and raspy and nice, and we've also discovered something between myself and Calvin. We might be forming a band soon. Because we've just discovered this morning that we're both into music. I can play the bass guitar just about, and apparently Kelvin can sing. So
And I do have a piano at home that I'm trying to learn
ah,
how to play. So maybe give
the
it a year or two.
the Tectides band has been born today. With that very
uh,
happy note, let's get into today's stories. And we're starting with something quite similar to something we saw last week, where we are seeing fintechs move into full scale financial institutions. Flutterwave has secured a Nigerian banking license. The Pan African payments giant has secured a microfinance banking license in Nigeria after processing over 40 billion in lifetime payments. The license came through its January 2026 acquisition of open banking startup Mono, and it allows Flutterwave to hold customer deposits and issue loans for the first time. Its CEO has said that the move will dramatically improve their margins since money will stay on the Flutterwave platform instead of flowing through third-party banks. What are your thoughts, Kelvin? We saw this last week with MoneyPoint as they entered into Kenya, another fintech from Nigeria that has purchased a microfinance banking infrastructure. Your thoughts?
I believe it's part of a growing trend. Like you said, we are seeing with a lot of these bigger fintech companies, there's a value in owning most of the infrastructure that you're using at that level. Flutterwave, I think they're celebrating 10 years this year, as well as a couple of other fintechs like Paystack, also PiggyVest as well. And I think there's one other big one that is also 10 or 11 even this year. So maybe there's some value in going back to 2015, 2016 to see what was happening then. A lot of these big fintechs happened to come up around that time. But yeah, as you get bigger, you start to consolidate. You want to control as much of the infrastructure as possible because it allows you to retain more value. It's impressive to see some of these startups that just started off as tech guys with a laptop doing their thing, and now they are running the payment rails of a continent as massive as Africa. So it's really good. I think what happened with this story is that they got the banking license at the time they acquired Mono, but it wasn't reported as well. We needed to come back and talk about that part of it because it adds another element of it. But now they'll be able to issue account numbers, issue cards, offer a lot more services, especially for like their business customers. They can properly be a bank for their business customers now. So the margin should improve. Hopefully they continue to scale even bigger. I know their CEO has for a while talked about the vision for an IPO. So maybe this brings them closer to that dream. So we'll see.
Yes, and one of the CEO's dream is for it to become the JP Morgan of Africa or get acquired by one. But they hope to see that every 1 in 3 African transactions goes through Flutterwave, which is quite a big dream. And I think that they're making very smart moves. We're seeing they're also reviving a lending product they had. There's a lot that's going on. And I think for fintechs that are coming up and growing, this is a masterclass in vertical integration, in very smart purchase moves, and in the importance of infrastructure as a fintech organization. As you scale up, infrastructure comes quite more critical, especially due to margins, because for them, they have quite a huge base of people, 2 million individual customers and 4 million business customers. That's a huge base. And now they're thinking about how do we maximize profit per customer, right? And infrastructure is an amazing way to do that. So I think that's definitely something for anyone in the startup space to think about as they scale, because when you're starting out, you're just looking to offer the best service you can. And as we had talked about last week, you want to niche down as much as possible so that you can give the best service to those particular people. But once you have quite a large customer base, then the question starts becoming, how can I maximize profit per customer? And that's where infrastructure plays a big role.
Yeah, the other thing that plays a big role at that scale is regulation. As you get to that level, the regulators start to look at you a bit more, and it's good to see they are trying to get these licenses. They're also part of the CBN's new anti-money laundering program that we'll talk about later on the podcast. So you can see that they are getting mature in terms of regulation. I know a lot of, especially the big fintech startups in Nigeria, they have necessary licenses to operate in the country. And so we are beginning to see more and more of this day. And it's interesting to see that they kind of celebrate these licenses when they get them. They do like a big announcement on social media, on all of their platforms to let everybody know. So you can start to see that compliance is playing a major factor in customer acquisition, not just for securing customers, but also is like used as a marketing strategy now, being compliant with the regulatory body. So maybe it's starting to look like a trend now. We did put out an article on Startup Graveyard about compliance, and yeah, I think it's something we have started to notice, this compliance trend. And at the end of the day, it's good for the customer, it's good for companies, and it's good for everybody. So more of that. Moving on, Ghana is turning its national ID card into a payment card as well. So the national ID card now serves three purposes. One is for, well, it's an identity document. Two, it's an e-passport, as is accepted in about 197 countries, and now it is going to be a payment instrument. And that means that users can execute cross-border transactions in over 200 countries. You can use it to pay in stores and withdraw cash. And the cool thing with this is that it kind of removes the bottleneck of trying to register with a bank, because if your ID card serves as a digital wallet, that means it just basically brings a lot of unbanked customers directly into the digital finance system without getting them to go to open a traditional account. So I think it's quite an impressive move from Ghana, and one that can be, we talk a lot about unbanked customers, especially in financial technology, talk about banking the unbanked and all of that. This is like a nationwide strategy to bank a lot of people at the same time. And I think it's quite clever the way they went about it. In terms of the hiccups that this could experience in real life, that's left to be seen, but I think it's quite a clever move.
Yeah, I agree with you, Kelvin. It's a very smart move. And I think I tried to check if there's any other country in the world that has done this. And I think the only one that has come close is Estonia. They're not necessarily an e-wallet, but their digital ID system allows citizens to manage banking and to sign documents. So I think Ghana over here is in a world of its own, if I'm not mistaken. And they have credit card penetration of 0.6%, which is very very low as of 2024, and it's been declining. Now, obviously, I think the African market as a whole is not very big on credit cards. We prefer debit cards. So I think that penetration might be low across the board. I don't know about Nigeria. I know in Kenya it's quite low. People prefer debit cards to credit cards. We're not as open to debt as probably the US is. We're quite conservative in that space. But I'm seeing this as a very smart move for reaching unbanked people. And they've also made it very easy. You can activate it through My Citizen. I'm thinking of people in rural spaces who can just easily access what it is that they need. They're reducing reliance on international cards, and they can now rely on domestic infrastructure, which I think is another trend that we are seeing across the continent, where we're preferring our own local infrastructure to international infrastructure. Last year, we talked about data centers a lot and us wanting to have them locally. And now we're seeing infrastructure in the payment systems as well. Now, I do have one question that comes to mind with this, and that is, I wonder what the implications will be on things like taxation and surveillance by the government on your financial transactions. This has been a big issue in Kenya here. We're seeing our government is starting to look at our M-Pesa transactions, which was a huge concern. It raised quite a bit of uproar that they have the right to simply go through your M-Pesa, which is, the question is, where does privacy begin and end? And I wonder, when the infrastructure is owned by the government, what kind of implications are there? Now, those are just questions that I ask myself. I don't think that it negates the extensive amount of positive that comes from this. I've seen that they are also exploring a partnership with the Ghana Gold Board to use the card for gold trading and tokenization transactions, which is amazing as we see more young people trying to invest in things like gold. And obviously, this might create a trend across the board where we see other African countries seeking sovereign payment systems that are independent of global card infrastructure. But I do have the question on, what does that imply for taxation? I think it would be a good move for everyone to make sure that everyone is paying the taxes that they should. But then the question of privacy comes in. That's where my mind goes.
I mean, that's a very serious concern. And I mean, sometimes you get excited by the technology as a tech person that you don't think about the implications of that. And this wasn't an angle I was thinking about. And yeah, now that I've said it out, it is worrying. But yeah, sometimes you allow things to run its course, and I guess we'll see how this plays out in a year or two from now. As for credit, I'm going back to what I said earlier. In doesn't seem in Africa, especially West Africa, East Africa, doesn't seem we like credit systems like that. In Nigeria, it's under 2% in terms of credit card penetration, and I believe that's why we are seeing more and more fintech startups and companies offering credit services, because they're trying to bridge that gap between the people's trust in credit facilities and the infrastructure that traditional banks haven't really pushed for in that regard. It's credit is not really a system. Speaking from Nigeria, you don't really see marketing for credit in terms of traditional banks. So it's these days now with fintechs, you're beginning to see more and more of them pushing for credit facilities. So it's interesting to see what the applications of this digital wallets, a national ID card, comes in. I wonder how Nigeria, if they were to down the line, would go about implementing something like this, because I don't think it's that feasible for us. But before I start to drag Nigeria on another episode, I will leave it at that. I will just leave it.
Yeah. I do want to point out one trend that I think we've been seeing, and I think I've mentioned it before, and that is B2G, business to government. I think we are beginning to see our governments start to really embrace technology. And so for startup founders and entrepreneurs who are looking for innovative solutions, this might be a space to start to think about. We've always thought about B2C, B2B, but I think we're starting to see a lot more business to government opportunities opening up, this being one of them. It just shows that there's opportunity to grow and innovate for governments. Moving forward, still on something that we had mentioned earlier, which is compliance. Kenya is probing Meta Ray-Ban's smart glasses privacy concerns. Kenya's Office of the Data Protection Commissioner, or DPC, has launched a formal investigation into the Meta's Ray-Ban smart glasses following a petition by a digital rights group, the Oversight Lab, who they're supported by about 150 organizations. They feel that there's footage that has been recorded by the glasses, which includes intimate scenes, bank details, private moments, and it was being sent to Nairobi-based contractors through a Meta subcontractor called Summer Source for AI training purposes without the consent of the people that were filmed. The investigation joins parallel probes that Meta is facing by UK regulators and also a lawsuit in the United States. So they seem to be violating several data privacy issues. And so the ODPC is assessing whether they have breached Kenya's Data Protection Act of 2019. If these violations are proved, then we could find fines and a mandatory privacy by design changes to be made. The case is not the only one that they have in Kenya. They have existing legal issues in Kenya where 187 former content moderators are seeking 1.6 billion in compensation. They seem to be having lawsuits everywhere. So Kenya has joined the UK and the US in formally scrutinizing Meta over the issue, which is marking a growing global regulatory response. Major privacy violations, if you ask me. I don't know. Very
I
fishy.
mean, I don't know why Meta always seems to be in this privacy consent all the time. It's almost like every time I see a headline about Meta, it's often about data privacy consent. Again, it's the same case here. It makes me feel some type of way personally because growing up, for me at least, one of the people that I looked up to in tech was Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO, founder of Meta. And so you have these dreams of, I mean, you're in the tech space too, and you watch the documentaries about Mark, and you think dropping out of school to pursue something in tech is the way, and then reality slaps you that you're in Nigeria and you need to focus on reading your book and passing passing your exam. And so you go on with school and all of that, but he's definitely one of those people I looked up to when I was younger, and so there is that side of it for me. But in terms of privacy consent, it's definitely something that needs to be looked into. I think with the smart glasses, it's a very interesting technology, and I think it's one we'll see a lot of development in the near future. Because if they are finding explicit contents like this, I wonder what other applications they are using them for. One of the things that comes to mind is on websites where you see this check for are you a robot, and then you have this test that you have to click to identify an object. And we found out in recent years that they were using all of that data to train machine learning models. So we have just been used as a society to train all of these models. So then I'm thinking with the smart glasses, what if they are capturing all this data without people knowing? What are they using that data for then? Are they using it to train models too? Are they using it for more nefarious reasons? There are too many questions that I have when it comes to data privacy. And with Africa at the moment, you see there's a lot more scrutiny when it comes to data privacy. So funny enough, in episode 32, we talked about Kenya trying to bring criminal applications for high risk AI software. Maybe this is actually one of the cases where criminal charges would make sense, because if you're capturing explicit content of people without their knowledge, then that does bring some criminal charges for me. But yeah, very concerning stuff.
Yeah, I agree with you that this warrants criminal charges, because if you're capturing people's bank details, how is that not exposing them to potential fraud or such kind of issues? So I do agree with you that this is a high risk thing. And I also do think that for a long time, Kenya especially has been used as a data extracting testing ground for very many AI companies. And I'm grateful that we're starting to look into such things. Last year, I believe, one of the organizations, human rights organizations for freelancers and remote workers, brought up issues with this specific business space where a lot of Kenyans were contracted to do this work, were being paid very horribly. And now we're seeing that even the information that they were being allowed access to was actually not information that they should have had. So I do think there's a lot of gray areas when it comes to AI and policies and governance across the globe because it's so new. We're still figuring out how to ensure that we protect people. Now, I will say this, and I know that this is an unpopular opinion. I do think that for you to actually make a difference in the world, you do have to break some rules. But that is, if you wait for permission too often, you may not get to where you need to go. Now, I do not think that it should be on such scales, but I don't know. We have to wait and see where the regulations will go because I do think that the policymakers are still quite behind. They do not. I also do think that we have the problem of we don't have a lot of young people in policy making. So I don't know that they yet understand how to build policy for AI, but that's just an opinion. So we have to see how the landscape will rise to meet the growing AI issues that will come up because they will consistently come up as it continues to grow. We've seen issues of people using AI and then harming themselves. So there's still quite a lot of gray areas when it comes to technology. And because it's growing so fast, I don't know how our lawmakers are going to be able to catch up with it.
I was going to make a comment on breaking a couple of rules that you said.
Yes. You disagree, it's okay.
You usually say we always agree on everything. This is one of those times that I don't fully agree because I feel like it's kind of there are certain places that I may agree. For example, in terms of security. So there is always the news and maybe there have been some actual classified files that showed, for example, in an America, there was like massive surveillance going on. But you think about the application of this technology and it's used to prevent like terrorism and terrorist attacks, right? If you don't have that surveillance, then how do you get the information to prevent these attacks? So it's one of those areas where maybe I'm not knowledgeable enough, maybe need to read more from the experts. But for me, I'm like, how do you go around preventing the terrorist attack without having that surveillance? Don't know that there's a way to do that. So there are cases like that maybe I'm a bit more lenient on. In a way, maybe I wouldn't mind personally. But in other cases, for example, a private company and a private company that has a track record of data privacy concerns around the world, yeah, maybe I'm not so I'm not so keen on them having that kind of access to data. So yeah, maybe that's just what I'll add. Moving on, the South African Revenue Service SARS has unveiled its Modernization 3.0 roadmap, which aims to give a unique digital identity to every taxpayer between 2026 this year and 2030. Again, this is like a growing trend that we are beginning to see in the big four countries in Africa where they are trying to streamline. There's a lot of streamlining of the tax experience. There is a lot of trying to capture more of the taxable economy. It's something I guess we have to talk about. There is the need for having these applications of taxing. There's a lot of good that those taxes can do. And when things work well, it's fine to collect these taxes. It's fine to capture it. And I mean, we can also see applications of artificial intelligence here too. They are trying to use artificial intelligence to build an intelligent case management system. They also want to automate VAT assessments by linking systems directly to points of sales, which is POS systems. So there are some really good applications of the tech, but there's always the thing with taxing. And I think on this podcast, we are both like, if you're going to tax, then we should be seeing the results of the tax. South Africa is one of the places I would like to visit at some point in my life to see what that society is like. I think from the images I've seen, they seem maybe more, at least the cities seem very close to European or even American cities, the big cities like Cape Town, Johannesburg. So it seems quite cool, but I don't know, or I'm not knowledgeable enough about if they are also feeling the overtaxing that we are feeling in Nigeria and Kenya. So yeah, I think that's what I have to say on this.
Yeah, I do think that they are showing us a very clear picture of what the next generation of Africa revenue authorities will look like. They're AI native, they're biometric first, they're very tech centered. They have, I do think that I agree with their way of doing things, because what they're trying to do is prevent revenue leakage. So they're trying to look for who isn't paying taxes and how can we make sure that they pay taxes. I think, 100% behind that. People should pay taxes. What I don't agree with is overtaxing your people. I think there should be something humane about the way governments tax their people, especially when it's in the African continent where we know that the level of income is not very high for most people. So if you overdo it, then you encourage people to evade paying taxes. But I do think that when it comes to preventing leakage, I am all about it, especially large organizations. I think sometimes we forget that large organizations seriously fail to pay taxes in many of our countries. So I'm seeing that, yeah, they do. And then the people who pay taxes very faithfully are the middle class working people who are just overburdened by the whole thing. So I do like the way that they have done it. They say that in the year 2025, 2026, they were able to prevent revenue leakage of 75 billion rand just using this AI driven verification. So I do like that. They're also putting in instant payment systems around the existing PayShap infrastructure that they have, which will reduce the cash in circulation gradually and also make things easier. The over 6 million taxpayers are already receiving automatic tax assessments annually, and then this will expand to VAT returns. I think that makes life very easy for a taxpayer, where you're already getting an assessment of what you should be paying at the end of the year. You don't have so many calculations to make. That makes it easier. It reduces friction. So I think it makes you more um, accessible to paying your taxes because there's not so much friction. So I honestly like the way that they're doing it in terms of making sure we're capturing all the revenue that is owed to us, not necessarily looking for ways to punish, like what we saw with Kenya last week, where they're trying to increase the how much tax they're taxing people, and so they're removing some things that were set up to protect small businesses, like the 5 million return profit for you to pay VAT. Such things I think are not necessary, but ensuring that everyone is paying taxes, I am behind that 100%. So yeah, really cool technology. And I think this is what the next we're going to see across the globe, where our revenue collection authorities are AI based. There's biometrics, there's unique identifiers, and you're getting your annual revenue tax returns already calculated for you, and it just makes life easy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's that last part where you have these assessments that already tell you what you should be paying. I think there should be more, if there's any innovation in taxing that is highly needed, that's the one, especially for individuals, small businesses that will not have the capacity to have this tax. units that do all of that figuring out. It will be helpful to have these tools, not necessarily have to do with AI, they are just smart tools that you can build that can help people calculate their taxes. So that is the innovation that I would be looking for.
Okay. And lastly, we have seen Nigeria is bringing in still more compliance, this time still in fintech, this time in anti money laundering. The Central Bank of Nigeria has brought in several organizations, Flutterwave, Paystack, Juicyway, and they've brought them together. They've put them into a program that's aimed at strengthening compliance frameworks around anti money laundering, counterterrorism. So, this is a first in a series of structured regulatory engagements. And they have made it very clear that this does not constitute approval or a license. It's simply an engagement framework for them to see how they can improve AML in the country.
Yeah, it's quite cool. I mentioned it earlier when we talked about the Flutterwave story. That especially in Nigeria, we are beginning to see the CBN try to work with fintech startups a bit more than we had seen in the past. It's always good, I believe, to have a good relationship between the private sector and the government. I always believe it's very good to have that good relationship, and we are seeing the CBN do that now with fintechs to work on some anti-money laundering regulation, counter-terrorism, and things of that nature. We also in the past saw, I think it was last year that we saw them do something similar with some crypto startups. Quidax, I remember, was one of them, where they, I think it was like an incubation program that they did. So that engagement between the CBN and these startups are good for the development of the economy, but also for the development of the technology. Because when you're working closely with the fintech startups, they can tell you some of the technologies that are coming up, and then the CBN can in turn create regulation around that. They are more knowledgeable about what the technology is, and then they can give valuable oversight, regulatory oversight to the startups. So I'm a big fan of this working relationship.
Yeah, I don't think I can add anything to that. I think it's a very good partnership, and I do think that it will bring a lot of insights into how the Nigerian government and the private sector can improve security for its people.
And on that note, I guess it's a wrap. Thank you for joining us another week, and do take care.